Okay, hello, anybody who's interested in this. This is the square I'm working on at the moment. The objective is to get about 6 inches completed and then turn your bottom beam so that you can actually reach the part that you want to work at. I have turned the beam once, which is fantastic, although it did take a bit of time. I've got here the tools that I use, which is basically Mum's old proggy hook, which is a bit crude, made at the, I think it was the Vane Tempest Colliery in Seaham Harbour by a willing NCB worker, and a pair of scissors, which are probably not going to be used to be cutting. This grid here, what I found is that, particularly at the start, the canvas just wasn't on correctly. I'd counted all the threads, I'd seamed my edges and everything else, but still when it was on the frame, I've concluded actually that the frame is actually a bit wonky, but never mind. I've packed it out with various things. But I was using a permanent marker, which has proved quite useful to identify what comes next, really, because I'm typically working up. As you see, I've got interlocking squares, so I have to work out from both sides coming in where this line is going to be, for example. So I have to set the pattern at this side so I can identify which of the rows actually is the edge row here. I'm not sure if I've explained that very well, but anyway, I'll just show you the technique that I've been using. I've got underneath, obviously I've got the rags I've got vary in size. There's quite a few short ones. I think there's a nice long one here. And obviously if you're working on a little piece, then use the shortest one you've got so that you can use them up. But never mind, let's crack on. I'm going to leave this little bit here. I'll just pull this one down into order there. I'm working sort of concurrently on various of the rows, simply because it seems to make it easier. I don't know, I'm no expert at this. So I've put in a few of these purple, I suppose, stitches, tufts. Right, so I've gone down with my hook on my line, which you don't necessarily have to use, but I'm using that as a guide. I take my hook down quite a distance because what I'm trying to produce is a hole about that size. Excuse me. The hole needs to be that size to be able to hook the fabric, pull it through. My aim, although it wasn't when I started, if you look at this, that was my sort of early attempt, and then as it got easier, or as I got used to it, my tufts seemed to neaten up quite substantially, and that is because these scissors are the perfect way for me to gauge the height of the tuft and pulling it from the back so it becomes nice and tight. Now that does mean that it's kind of like a two-part operation. You might argue that it makes it twice as hard. I don't know. But I'm getting quite a lot of satisfaction from just pulling that tuft nice and tightly against the scissors. The stitches or tufts have to be, as far as I can tell, quite snug against one another, and depending on which fabric I'm using, because some are obviously thinner than others, some fray more than others, it's about 1 or 2 strands of the canvas apart. So what I'm endeavouring to do is I want the fabric to come up flat. I want the fabric to go down flat as well. So that gives me a very neat stitch. Pull it against the scissors. That means all my stitches are nice and even. So that is how you do it. And that's it. Shall I do a few more? Just so you can see it wasn't a fluke. So drag it through. I'm doing this with my hand because it's simpler. You might wonder why I don't use the hook as the implement to get that tension on. It's because it's got a hook on the end. That one came out easily, but I've tried using this, and what invariably happens is the hook gets hooked onto the fabric, and I just end up having a bit of a tussle with it. So it is quite... The first thing I've got to do is get my stitch straightened and then pull it against the scissors, and that's giving me a nice even finish. Sometimes it seems harder to pull through for some reason. I expect that is down to the size of the hole that you put in initially. So if I put a really big hole in, it should come up fairly easily. Right, I'm getting to the end of this little piece. So I'm going to pull it tight there, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going normal spacing and just pull the end through without undoing the last tuft that you've made. So there's the end. Now, just to show you, I'll do it with a different colour. You go back down the same hole, put your fabric under your cloth, hook it on, pull it through. So you've got 2 little ends there together. You can have lots of these little joins depending on how long your strips are really. Pull in nice and tight against. Although that does seem like quite a large loop, it's okay. I'm going in, so I didn't. That one hasn't straightened up. It's nice and straight. And then when you've got a few of your tufts in, just take both ends and trim it, and you can barely see where it's joined. Obviously, there are lots and lots of joins in here. Interestingly, let me just show you where it's what I would call, it's perfectly good, this here. If you can see that, it's not quite as neat and tight, oh, I've got a cat on here, as that area there. There's the cat. Yes. Okay, I guess if you've got any questions, then you could put it on